For the love of the awaited Saviour of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif, wa ala salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي كان موجودا قبل حدوث الأشياء ويبقى بعد فناء الأشياء تفرد بالأولية والقدم ووسم كل شيء ما عداه بالفناء والعدم كما قال عز شأنه كل شيء هالك إلا وجهه وكل نفس ذائقة الموت وقال كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذي الجلال والإكرام سبحان الله الذي منه خلقة العباد وإليه المعاد فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو الملك الذي لا ينازع في ملكه ولا يضاد في حكمه يعذب من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء ويرحم من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء تعذيبه المسيئين عدل وعفو تفضل ونشهد أن محمدا سيد المرسلين وخير المبشرين والمنذرين صلى الله عليه وآله الهداة المهديين من ركب سفينتهم نجاه واهتدى ومن تخلف عنها ضل فغرق وهوى إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Awaited Saviour of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Usikum bittaqwallah wal wara'a fi dinikum. I call myself and all of you towards God consciousness and piety in the way of the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever we do in this world, we know that it has effects upon our own selves and upon those around us. What we don't necessarily imagine or think about is the extent of the effect that it can have on people. A person who brings a child into this world, when that person conceives, the child immediately is going to be affected. Whatever a person does during that gestational period, it is going to be affecting the child. When the child is born and the way in which the parents raise the child, it is going to be an effect on the child. In fact, according to studies, the formative periods of the first 10 and 15 years of a person's life largely determines the type of person and character that a person will develop into for the rest of their life. Think about that very carefully. A person may live 80 years, but that first 10 or 15 years will determine so much about the way in which they live for the rest of their life, for the forthcoming 60 years. And of course, this is an evidence of why it is so important to be able to raise children in a good way. But the moment you begin to realize that there is that cause and that effect, but also the longevity of the effect, we then can take it a step further. Imagine what a person does in those 60 years of their life. The choices that they have been making have been largely determined on how they have been raised for the first 15 years of their life. But those decisions that they make in those 60 years, imagine how many more people it will affect. It will affect their immediate family. It will affect their immediate friends. It may affect their community. And as a person rises to having more and more prominence, more and more responsibility, the things that they do in those 60 years has an even further effect. It is like me saying that proverb, a person throws the pebble or the stone into the lake, and as the pebble drops, you will see the ripple effect, won't you, taking place. There is just one ripple, but it goes out, outward, outward, and eventually the ripple will hit the banks, the shores of the entirety of the lake. One small pebble, one tiny stone, smaller than the size of a finger, yet it has the capacity to be able to reach so far and so wide. When you think about this, we begin to realize the potential power that a human being has to be able to effect good or bad, not just on another human being, not just on another human being's life, but entire generations can be affected by one person's actions, good or for bad. The hadith that I want to be able to reflect on for this week is a hadith from our sixth Imam Jaffer Ladak, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. And as ever, I will encourage you to note down the hadith for you to be able to memorize it, for you to be able to think about it for this week, inshaAllah. The hadith is found in Al-Kafi. Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam, it's part of a longer hadith, but I will just read the one line that I wish to be able to reflect on for this week, inshaAllah. Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says the following: Man yaf'alu ash-sharra bin-nasi فَلَا يُنْكِرُ الشَّرَّ إِذَا فُعِلَ بِهِ. Whoever does evil to people, مَنْ يَفْعَلُ الشَّرَّ بِالنَّاسِ, whoever does evil to people, فَلَا يُنْكِرُ الشَّرَّ إِذَا فُعِلَ بِهِ. He should not be surprised, he should not reject evil when it is done back to him. A person who does evil to people, if evil then comes and strikes him back, فَلَا يُنْكِرُ الشَّرَّ, he should not reject it, he should not be annoyed at it, he should not be surprised at it, he should not hate it if evil comes and strikes him back as well. In this hadith, we have a number of very subtle points. The first one is the issue of the attitude that a person has. But we also have the issue of what a person sows, they will reap. And then you have the other issue of the effects of the things that we do to a number of people and how those come back to us as individuals. Have a look at the hadith again and just see how the Imam speaks about it. Man yaf'alu ash-sharra bin-nas, whoever does evil to people. So the Imam here isn't saying evil one-to-one. Sometimes a person can manipulate or do something wrong to one individual. The Imam is speaking about my individual act to people collectively, i.e., it may be that something that I do actually has a profound impact on people at large, in a community, in a nation. Now, what happens when I perform an act that actually has such wide consequences beyond myself? Think about this very carefully. Imagine I plant a seed in you, and 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 all the several people that are here right now. One seed in each. If I was to plant a good seed in each and every one of you, then of course it would germinate a good seed. And what would grow from that, for example, might be a number of good things that come out of it. If sometimes you plant one seed in a field, you know that it will grow, but then it will spread its seed, won't it? And eventually, over the course of time, an entire field will come from it. One seed produces the entire field. Sometimes we don't remember that that entire field started from just one plant. So if I was to plant one good seed and it germinates and becomes a field in every one, can you see the amount of goodness that comes out? How far-reaching it is. How much it will affect and come on and grow and come on and eventually grow to other parts that we had never imagined. But similarly, if I was to plant an evil seed, how that can manifest into different actions, into different things of evil. If I plant one into every one of you, eventually that will grow to being so much evil within a society. It won't just be one type of evil that comes out of it, because evil begets another evil. A person has one type of sin, it will evolve into another type of sin. Iblis had one particular sin. He was arrogant before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was the root, that was the seed of his sin. But look how much has come from it after, because he could not control that one thing. Imam says, مَنْ يَفْعَلُ الشَّرَّ بِالنَّاسِ, whoever does evil to people, فَلَا يُنْكِرُ الشَّرَّ إِذَا فُعِلَ بِهِ, he should not become angry or annoyed if it is done back to him. If I create a society which has multiple evils and one of them comes back to me, why should I be surprised? Why would I be annoyed if that is the society that I have fostered? The Holy Quran speaks about this. In Surah Ibrahim, chapter number 14, verse 24 to 27, a series of verses of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us an amazing picture about what we grow and what we plant as seeds and how wide they can grow and where they can reach, without us even realizing that those things will continue to grow in our life and even well after our life. 3 verses. Let's have a look. Surah Ibrahim, verses 24 to 27. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alam tara kayfa daraba Allahu mathalan kalimatan tayyibatan kashajaratin tayyibatin asluha thabit wa far'uha fis sama'. Do you not see, do you not consider how Allah has given you an example of a good word? In the hadith, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is talking about actions. مَنْ يَفْعَلُ الشَّرْ, whoever does an evil action. Here Allah starts with a good word. Do you not consider how Allah gives you an example of kalimatan tayyibatan, a pure word? What is this pure word like? كَشَجَرَةٍ طَيِّبَةٍ, it is like a pure tree. It is like a good tree. أَصْلُهَا ثَابِت, its root is fixed firm. The winds will not uproot it. Whatever occurs outside, the weather patterns, the climate, it is deeply entrenched in the soil. Its asluha is thabit. وَفَرْعُهَا فِي السَّمَاءِ, and as a result, its branches reach tall into the sky. Because the root is firm, it can grow in all directions, it will produce so much. What will it produce? The next ayat says, تُؤْتِي أُكُلَهَا كُلَّ حِينٍ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهَا. It is ever yielding in all fruits, in every season, by the permission of its Lord. Not only is it tall, not only can it go so wide, it will continue to give in different times of the year different things. This is the example Allah gives. وَيَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ الْأَمْثَالِ لِلنَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَذَكَّرُونَ. Allah gives you parables like this for you to be able to think about, for you to be able to use to recall in your own life. But then Allah switches and gives us another example. وَمَثَلُ كَلِمَةٍ خَبِيثَةٍ. Allah gives us an example of a word which is khabitha, which is evil, which is dirty. What is it like? كَشَجَرَةٍ خَبِيثَةٍ. It is like that of an evil tree. اجتثت من فوق الأرض ما لها من قرار. Uprooted from the surface of the earth, unable to endure. It is in the ground, but when the wind comes, it will be knocked. It will be taken away. It will not endure. Why? Because its foundation is not strong. Allah continues, يثبت الله الذين آمنوا بالقول الثابت في الحياة الدنيا والآخرة. Thus, Allah grants firmness to the believers both in this world and in the next. Allah wants us to be able to understand here the potential of our deeds, the potential of our words, and how far-reaching they can go. And that we don't realize sometimes the things we do, the consequences that they have in this world, let alone the next. It is very interesting, isn't it? Sometimes when we think about our akhirah and we're in barzakh, we often talk about things like sadaqah jariyah. So there's an ongoing act that I do that will bring me continuous reward because the act in this world continues. It never stops. And so it continues to illuminate, it continues to germinate, it continues to produce for me even in the next world. I realize this, but we don't always realize the opposite as well. There's sometimes an act that we do, the choices that we make can actually have such far-reaching consequences on a person's life. It may affect them for the rest of their life. It may affect the next generation that comes. The choices that we have in front of us allow us to think about the impact that we have, not only on our own life, not only on the life of those immediately around us, but as far wide as we could imagine, and even for an ongoing period beyond our ability to comprehend even time and space. Imagine Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the way in which the smallest of his behaviors used to be. The companion Ibn Abbas has a narration where he talks about the sunnah of the Prophet. When we say sunnah here, we literally just mean the way in which he used to act with people, and how this had the greatest of impact on them, and it was carried away generation after generation. I'll give you one hadith from Ibn Abbas, and then I'll use it as an example to show you how one act can go so far and wide that we don't realize its impact until today. The Prophet, according to his hadith, Abdullah ibn Abbas says that the Prophet used to have a certain way and nature about him. The hadith says that when the Prophet used to sit down, his preference was to just sit on the earth. So of course at that time in Masjid Nabawi there were no carpets. So it was not that there was a rug brought for him, he wanted to just sit on the earth. Abdullah ibn Abbas continues, he says the Prophet used to even eat from the earth. So his choice was natural food as much as possible. Abdullah ibn Abbas says that when someone used to be in the street and someone used to offer him barley bread, the Prophet would stop and participate. The meaning of this hadith is quite simple. Barley bread then was the cheapest sort of bread that slaves used to have access to. It wasn't a plush bread, it wasn't something expensive, good quality, it was the lower quality. So the Prophet, if he was walking in the street and even a slave asked him, Ya Rasulullah, will you just sit down and have some food with me? Rasulullah used to sit on the street, on the floor, on the earth, and eat a little bit of bread. Now, this is quite interesting. The Prophet used to sit like this with his companions. Do you know where this used to take, how much this used to take people? The Prophet used to sit in the majlis, in the gathering, in the sitting, inside Masjid Nabawi, like this with his companions, eating the most ordinary of foods, sitting in the most ordinary of ways. Often enough, tribes used to come and visit the Prophet. The Prophet would send an ambassador, the Prophet would send a letter, people would come. Someone who was an ambassador of the king would come, and they used to walk into Masjid Nabawi with their entourage, and they would look around and say, where is this messenger of God that commands armies, that has all of this sadaqat and taxes and riches available to him? The Prophet was indistinguishable to the rest of the people sitting there. And these small behaviors used to impact these ambassadors and shock them so much that they didn't know whom was the Prophet from amongst the companions, because all of them were sitting together in exactly the same way. One of those tribes that came and visited the Prophet was from Yemen. It's called the Ash'ari tribe. And this was early on in Medina al-Munawwarah. He comes and visits the Prophet, and he himself converts after sitting with the Prophet in this most simplistic of manners. He goes back to his tribe and he convinces them as well to become Muslim. This tribe invites companions to come and convert the rest of Yemen. Eventually they do convert at the hand of Imam Ali alayhi salam. By the time it comes to our 7th Imam's time, this one tribe has now migrated from Yemen to Kufa. They migrate from Kufa to Qum, and they establish the city of Qum al-Muqaddasa, and they continue to be the greatest narrators of Ahadith from our Imams, from the 7th to the 11th, and eventually to the 12th Imam, and they establish the city of Qum as a city until today. How important is the city of Qum for us? As a madhab, in protecting the tradition since 1400 years till today, until when the Imam of our time comes. All of this city, this whole city, was established off the back of one family, off the back of one person going to Medina and sitting with the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا? Have you not taken time to consider an example from Allah? كَلِمَةً طَيِّبَةً كَشَجَرَةٍ طَيِّبَةٍ. That one good word, one pure word, is like the example of a good tree. We don't realize just how much it will sprout. We don't realize where it will reach in the future. That one conversation with one companion went back, and eventually it created the city of Qum, which eventually is where so much of our religion is protected from until today. In our own lives, we have the same opportunity. We have the opportunity to realize that when we have an opportunity to reach one person's heart, to make one good influence on a human being, we don't know that it's going to last with them for a lifetime. It's going to last into generations to come. But similarly, we should not be surprised that if we put evil out into the world, that will also germinate, that will also have a ripple effect. We should not be surprised when those evils come back to haunt us as well. Imam alayhi salam says in this hadith that we are studying for this week, مَنْ يَفْعَلُ الشَّرَّ بِالنَّاسِ, whoever does evil to people, فَلَا يُنْكِرُ الشَّرَّ إِذَا فُعِلَ بِهِ. He should not reject, he should not be surprised if it comes back to him, if evil hits him as well. In our own lives, we may take an opportunity to reflect on this hadith for this week. What do we want to do this week, this month, this year, that allows us to be able to spread and place that good seed that becomes شجرة طيبة, a tree that blossoms throughout this world and lasts for decades and centuries to come. This is something that all of us can do this week, inshallah, to be able to reflect on this. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, and grant us the tawfiq to be able to establish a good word, just as it is a good tree, inshallah, for ourselves in this world and in the hereafter. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أوصيكم بالتقوى الله والورع في دينكم. I call myself and all of you towards God consciousness and piety in the way of the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ألم تر كيف ضرب الله مثلا كلمة طيبة كشجرة طيبة. And in the hadith that we study this week, من يفعل الشر بالناس فلا ينكر الشر إذا فعل به. If a person does evil to people, they should not be surprised and reject when evil hits them back. When people hold them to account, when the evil that they have planted in society hits them back. This week, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, who is also likely to be a candidate for our future Prime Minister, had an opportunity to be able to lift people out of the poverty that they are very quickly sliding into. On social media and in political commentary this week, there was a question that was raised. The question is an important one, but as you know, in Islam does not set up rivalry between rich and poor, between man and woman, between black and white, between people of different nations and tribes. So the question, even though I'm repeating it from political commentary, but in our context, it is not because Islam sets up rivalry between rich and poor. As you know, Lady Khadija alayhi salam was the richest lady of her time, and what a phenomenal woman she was. In political commentary, the question was raised. Rishi Sunak and his wife, their combined family wealth makes them richer than the Queen. This is true. Now, as a side note, you may or may not know that Rishi Sunak's wife has some £500 million worth of shares in a company that is trading in Russia. And of course, only last week, the Chancellor of the Exchequer stated that he urges all Western businesses to pull out of Russia. But of course, one thing for the rest of us and one thing for them. So between he and his wife, their personal wealth is actually greater than the Queen. And this is a person who literally has stolen hundreds of millions of pounds worth of jewels from across the world. So you've got to be pretty rich as the Sunaks. The political question was raised this week. A person who is in such a privileged position, can he truly understand the poverty that is hitting people? To give you clarification on what level of poverty is hitting people, the CEO of Iceland, so a person who has to understand everything in regards to what's happening with food trends, the price of food, what people are buying, why they are buying it, across the country, internationally, imports and exports, the CEO of Iceland, stated that when we give out food packages to poor people, to people who are in need, food banks or whatever it may be, discounts, we no longer give potatoes because people in this country can no longer afford to boil the potatoes. So the potatoes are being left. So imagine you want to do a good deed. And by the way, in Shahr Ramadan, inshallah in 1 month's time here at the Baab, we will be doing collections and distribution for food banks in our local area. Keep an eye out. The poster will be with you in the coming week, inshallah. The CEO of Iceland is saying, we can no longer help people with potatoes as a staple part of their diet because no one's boiling them, because people can't afford the gas and the energy to be able to boil potatoes anymore. 5th largest economy in the world, this is. Effectively, what did the country get? 5 pence off the tax of petrol. Now you know how much the petrol is out there, everybody knows it. Yesterday I dropped my wife to the airport and I messaged her, I'm at a petrol station, 158.9. She goes, woohoo! Because that's the cheapest that we could find. It's got to a point where we're celebrating 158.9, can you imagine? Do you know how much of that 158 actually goes in tax? 5 pence was knocked off. Do you know how much the actual tax is? 58 pence. So you now know how much the profit is as well as the tax. The question was raised, can this person really assist us if he doesn't understand how people are living? If he's not willing to be able to even sit with people take their life experiences into account. Now, as I said, it's not about rich versus poor. Actually, it is about his politics. Actually, it's about his own heart, about the goodness of a person. And this was a big debate this week in political commentary. I want to make one comment. In philosophy, there is a statement that helps you answer this question. You don't need political discourse, you don't need to look into the 100 years of Tory thinking, Labour thinking. There's a simple philosophical assumption that helps you to answer it. I'll say it in Arabic so that you know it, how the philosophers answer it, and then you'll see it in English. أدل دليل على إمكان الشيء الوقوع. The greatest evidence for something, the possibility of something, the greatest evidence for something is its reality in existence. If I said to you, is it possible that aliens exist? Well, the moment you see an alien, it's the greatest evidence that aliens exist. There's no need to continue the philosophical debate. We're all wrangling with this question, will he, won't he? Will he help people? You know, in France, they capped the increase in energy prices to 4%. The government capped it to 4%. It's very possible. It's very possible to do it. But this is a person for the last 2 years who has failed to help so many people in society. The question is moot. The greatest evidence as to whether he will help people is whether he has helped people till date. The difference is in Islam very simple. That instead of just nibbling around the edges when evil occurs, Islam sought to overthrow evil from its very foundation. It didn't just nibble away at the edges and try to make incremental differences such that it has no real world impact on the way in which people live. It really wanted to overthrow evil from where it was created. The hadith that we have cited from Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam for this week's reflection could really help someone like Rishi Sunak to understand the anger and the fear and the anxiety that people have in this country at this moment. Look at the hadith again. مَنْ يَفْعَلُ الشَّرَّ بِالنَّاسِ, whoever does evil to people, فَلَا يُنْكِرَ الشَّرَّ إِذَا فُعِلَ بِهِ, he would not reject, he should not be surprised when evil is done back to him. If you allow a society to collapse within itself, to be struggling for even the most basics, but they now see each other as competition, they now dislike other human beings coming, they now are scrambling so hard just to survive, that this is their daily life, their daily grind. Do not be surprised when evil comes back to you in society. It will germinate in multiple different ways. It will grow. People's anger and fear and anxiety and frustrations will come out, and it will only create a worse cycle in society to go round and round. Something needs to be done. There needs to be a real change in the way in which the society we have created is established. Instead of the gap becoming bigger and bigger, the gap needs to become much smaller. In fact, there needs to be a series of changes. What some commentators are saying is very simple. Eventually, whenever the next election comes, Boris Johnson will not be able to stand. He will be too unpopular. Rishi Sunak is holding the cards in his pocket, so that as he goes for either being Prime Minister or he is, and then he has to go for re-election, he can then offer really good incentives and changes to the economy to be able to help the ordinary person. Because this will be his pledge. I will do this, and I will do this if you elect me. How much pain and suffering are people going to have to wait in those 2 years until that happens? Until he decides to pull those cards out and say, now I can make real changes to the tax system. Now I will really help you and give you a little bit of support. You will do well to remember this hadith. مَنْ يَفْعَلُ الشَّرَّ بِالنَّاسِ فَلَا يُنْكِرُ الشَّرَّ إِذَا فُعِلَ بِهِ. A person who does evil to people should not be surprised when evil comes back to him. This is literally, whatever you sow, you will reap. We have to learn this in our own lives. That just as he, in his privileged position, could have been able to help millions of people, how much evil is going to come out of what he has done, or lack of what he has done. Similarly, in our own lives, we have an opportunity to be able to help people. It can actually have wide-ranging changes throughout lives and throughout generations. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the tawfiq to be able to help people as per this hadith gives us insight into. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help all those who are struggling around the world and grant us the opportunity to serve the Imam of our time, inshaAllah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah alladhi la ilaha illa huwa al-halim al-kareem, ghafir al-dhanbi wa qabil al-tawb, wa huwa al-ghafur al-rahim. Subhana man sabaqat rahmatuhu ghadabah, wa basata al-yadayni bil-rahmah. سبحان من لم يكلف نفسا دون وسعها وعفى عن السيئات ولم يجاز بها. سبحان من لا يزداد على معاصي العباد إلا كرما وجودا وعلى كثرة الذنوب إلا عفوا وصفحا. نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو العطوف على العباد بجوده والعواد على المذنبين بحلمه. ونشهد أن محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين بعثه رحمة للعالمين. اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وعلى إمام المسلمين وقائد الغر المحجلين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صلوات الله عليه وآله وعلى سيدة نساء العالمين وبدعة خاتم النبيين سيدتنا فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلوات الله عليها وعلى الحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد بكربلاء وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليهم الصلاة والسلام. اللهم صل على مولانا صاحب الزمان محيي آثار البدع والطغيان خادم بنية الشرك والنفاق حاصر فروع البغي والشقاق صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آبائه الكرام متصل الليالي والأيام. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه واكحل نادرنا بنظرة منا إليه واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يذكر فتنفعه الذكرى. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون.